Hello everyone. Today we're going to dive into BigQuery Editions along with the pricing model for compute and storage and take a look at autoscaling. I will cover the terms first and then jump into the demo. Also, everything here is from our public documentation pages, so please review those pages to make sure you're the latest up-to-date information. So first let's review BigQuery and the features. So I have this page open and you can see here we have our standard, enterprise, and enterprise plus editions. We also have our on-demand. Our on-demand has a different pricing model than these editions where you buy a reservation, so we'll discuss that in detail. Down on the left here, you can see the features that is included with each of the editions. So please review this chart to see which features you need and then select the edition. And we'll talk about selecting some of this, but this chart will help you understand the features contained in each. There's also pricing. This is for US multi-region pricing. So just to give you an idea, if we're talking about price, we have our standard, which is our 4 cents per slot hour, enterprise, 6 cents per slot hour, enterprise plus. Enterprise plus has regional level DR. So we have different features in each of these. And then we have commitments. So this is known as pay-as-you-go pricing. So if you were to buy Enterprise Edition and you wanted a slot for an hour, it'd be 6 cents. And then you could also add a commit, which is a 1 year or 3 year commit. And your 1 year commit includes a 20% discount, and your 3 year commit is a 40% discount. So the pricing here that we mentioned throughout the talk will be in reference to these. And the discounts are for the Enterprise and Enterprise Plus, where you can buy these optional commitments. So the next piece is autoscaling. So autoscaling is new to BigQuery Editions, and this will allow you to match your slots to your workload. So as you need additional slots, or as slots are no longer needed, BigQuery can allocate those slots and also remove those slots. So the goal here is to allocate the slots based upon your workload versus buying a bunch of slots and then maybe having them underutilized or overutilized, and then you're either starving your queries of the necessary slots or you're wasting money by paying for slots that aren't being used. So we'll talk about autoscaling a little bit as well. The first thing I'd like to talk about are slots. So BigQuery uses slots, and these are basically CPUs that are used to execute your query. When your query is submitted to BigQuery, it breaks it apart into stages, and each of these stages require a different number of slots. So the first stage might be reading a lot of data, the second data might be doing aggregations, and so on. And each one of those stages has a different number of slots, and BigQuery can auto-scale. It's looking at the slots per stage, and this allows you to fine-tune our auto-scaling, so it doesn't just pick an auto-scaling number at the beginning of the query, and that's it. It's actually done for each stage. We have on-demand pricing. So this is typically for US regional, multi-regional at $6.25 per terabyte scanned. So you will pay for the amount of data scanned in BigQuery, and that is the logical bytes. And we'll talk about logical versus physical bytes. So if you scan 1 gig of data, you pay for that, and you're giving the number of slots that are available. So you might get a different number of slots, but you will be paying the price for the amount of data scanned. Now, capacity-based pricing, this is when you want to pay for your slots regardless of data scanned. So maybe you have a query that's scanning 10 terabytes of data and you're running this constantly. You could buy slots, and then you would know the cost of that because you'd pay for a certain number of slots, and it's regardless of the data scanned. In capacity-based pricing, you will purchase a reservation, which is the next piece here, and the reservations let you buy capacity. You can buy a baseline that will talk about capacity, and you can buy auto-scaling slots. You will assign those reservations to project folders and organizations, so you can share these reservations across your org. So we have the ability to share these. They're not locked into a single area, and everyone can share these. And your commitment, so commitment is when you buy slots and you pay for them 24/7. So if a 1 year commitment, you'll get a 20% discount, and a 3 year commitment, you'll get a 40% discount. And we'll talk about when it makes sense to buy a commitment. you typically want to buy this when you have a certain number of slots running 24/7, and then you would want to buy that number of slots and cover it and get the discount because you're using those slots regardless. So we think of a reservation as pay-as-you-go pricing, and then if those slots are being covered by a commitment, then you'll get a discount on those slots. Now let's cover the terms around autoscaling. So as mentioned before, autoscaling is new in BigQuery Editions. So when you create a reservation, you will have some configuration, and we'll go through these terms and what they mean when you create that reservation. So the first is baseline slots. Baseline slots are available to you immediately. So you're paying for them whether you use them or not 24/7, and they are always available to you. Baseline slots will be charged at the pay-as-you-go price unless they're covered by a commitment. So if you had a 100 baseline slots running in a reservation and you had a commitment for 100 slots, then that commitment would pay for those baseline slots. So if you're running slots for long periods of times or continuously throughout a year, you want to consider purchasing a commitment. Your baseline slots are also shared with other reservations. So if you have two reservations and they both have a baseline and one is idle and one needs more slots, then we will borrow those slots from that reservation to avoid automatically auto-scaling, which would be charged at a different rate. So first we want to use all the baseline slots across your commitments so we can use the slots you're currently paying for. Auto-scaling slots, these are the slots above your baseline and they're below your maximum reservation size. So when you create a reservation, you can specify the maximum number of slots you'd like to have. So if we say we want 1,000 as our maximum reservation size, and we have 100 baseline slots, we would have 900 auto-scaling slots. And auto-scale slots are charged at the pay-as-you-go price. They're not covered by a commitment, and BigQuery periodically evaluates the demand of your workload and will scale up and scale down accordingly. So those are your auto-scaling slots. And then we have the maximum reservation size. So you have a cap for the number of slots that you want to pay for. Now there is a caveat. I'll open this link and you can actually exceed the number of maximum slots, and I'll show you how that works. So here we have a commitment of 1,000 slots. We've created two reservations. This reservation has 300 baseline slots and this one has 700 baseline slots. And now let's say we run a BigQuery that needs 2,000 slots. So first we're going to go to the baseline and say we need 700 slots because, out of the 2,000. And then we're going to say, hey, we have 300 idle over here. So now we have 1,000 slots between these two because they're covered by our commitment. And then we're going to auto scale 600 slots. So we're going to auto scale up to 1,600. So you can look at this example online, and I just want you to be aware that the auto scale policy, the auto scaling slots kick in addition after we use all the available baseline and idle slots. So let's go ahead and jump into the demo. Within BigQuery, we're going to head over to the taxi dataset, and we will scroll down to the routine called SP demo pricing. Let's go ahead and edit this. So the top here goes over what we talked about a little bit. And the first thing I want to do is turn off cache results. So we make sure we don't get any cache results, which would not show us the pricing because cache results are just returned to you and there's no charge for them. So we're going to execute a fairly big query here that does some work so we can get some pricing because we want the byte scan to be a decent amount. So just went ahead and scanned the taxi trips table. And then the next query here, which I'll go through a little bit, it's going to compute the pricing, $6.25. It's going to find the number of slots. It's going to show us a query. And then we're going to actually look at stages. So we want to find the max slots used for across the stages. That just helps us see what stage used a lot of slots. And then there's also something called estimatable runnable units. And that shows us that BigQuery wanted more slots, but possibly could not get them. So let's go ahead and execute this and look at the results here. So here I've run it a couple times. So here we have a null reservation ID. So that is empty, meaning we're on demand pricing. And then if we scroll over here, we'll see the estimated on demand costs. So the estimated on-demand cost here is 3 cents. We used about 109 slots, and then we had a maximum of 200 slots for a stage, and then we have about 197 it would have liked to have had, but at that time it could not allocate them. So it's a good query to take a look and inspect what's happening. And then if you want to understand how many slots do you need, we have a slot estimator. So this will open up a new tab. And I'm showing you this before I create my reservation, because if you have a reservation and if you don't have a reservation, you'll see different items on the screen. So this is showing my slot utilization, basically my on-demand slots, and it's going to show me a recommendation. It will show me pay as you go, 1-year commitment and 3-year commitment, and this is for moving to editions. So it tells you all the specifics down here, and then this is based upon Enterprise Edition, and it's saying I should have 0 slots as a baseline and about 300 slots, which we saw from that query. We'd want about 300 slots, but our auto scale utilization is going to use that for a very short amount of time. So it would use it, and then most of the time would be spent waiting for the slots to be deallocated. So this is a great tool to take a look at, and would be the place you want to check out first. And this also will look differently. We'll run it again when we actually create a reservation. So let me go ahead and close this. Now the next thing is creating the reservation. So we'll create the reservation, and we'll go look at the user interface. So the reservation is going to be for the Enterprise Edition. We're going to have our baseline. So in this case, I'm doing 0 baseline because I basically don't want to pay for anything until I use it. And this is where I would set like 100 slots or 200 or etc. And then I have my auto scale slots. So these are bigger than my baseline. So I'll be scaling from 0 to 200 slots. And I went ahead and created a new reservation. And then I'm going to assign it. So this takes a minute or two while we explore the UI. So if we click on the assignment's been created, but it takes a few seconds, a minute or two to take effect. So let's take a look at the piece here. So we created our reservation, and this is our 100 slots, max slots of 200 with 0 baseline. And then we have our assignment. I assigned this to this project. So if I wanted to create a reservation through the user interface, this shows you more detail in terms of the pricing and everything. You come in here and type in your reservation name. You can pick your edition. If you pick standard edition, you have no baseline, so that field will be disabled. So you can see the baseline slots is disabled. And then we have Enterprise Edition, and you can pick different sizes in here, or just say, I want a size of 500, pick your own size of a max reservation, and your baseline slots can be 100. And then you have this ignore idle flag, so you could turn this on or off to control if you want to share these slots with other reservations. So that's available through the user interface, and we simply did that through the query here. So hopefully this has taken effect. We can check to see if it's taken effect here, and then it should be assigned and everything. So it's been assigned. And if we look at our capacity management again, right, we'll just want to show that it has been assigned in here with this sign. So go ahead and check both places. Now we should be able to rerun the query. If you do have a commitment, I'm not going to buy a commitment. I'll show you that and check that quick out. So if I create a commitment, this will be the, we'll create a test ID here, and we're going to choose our Enterprise or Enterprise Plus. We will choose our duration, the 1 or 3 year, and then we'll look at our renewal plan. So if we wanted to cancel after the term up here, you would select none, and you choose the number of slots. So we could do 100 slots here, and you would go ahead and press next and walk through the process, and the pricing is over here. So you can see your max slots and see your unused commitments. You can see all that over here on the right. And then typically you want to look at the slot estimator first to see how many slots you want to buy. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So hopefully everything's been assigned. If not, we'll know shortly. So we'll run the query, same query as before. And then we're going to run the same exact query we ran above with the estimation. And we should see a reservation ID this time. And we see our reservation ID. So here's our reservation ID. So that means this query ran and was used by this reservation. And we can see our slots, our max slots, and our estimated runnable units. So total bytes the cost here will be 0 for estimated costs. Even though it has bytes billed here, you'd look at this estimated costs. This is just because the query is used for on-demand, and I use it for reservations. So you just look at this on-demand cost field here. So after you're done that, let's jump back to the slot estimator, and then we'll deallocate our reservations. So the reservation, this should look slightly different because it says no slot utilization over the past 30 days. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of slots running, so mine looks pretty much empty, but this is where you can choose your different options here and your reservations, and you'd be able to see the effect of changing number of slots on your workload. So I could always do a deeper dive video with more data in this, but if you're looking at your data, you will see this all filled out. And please take a look at the documentation, and it will walk through how that works and show you the different numbers. So let's jump back to BigQuery here. And I think I have a few tabs open. Yep. And the next tab here is we would drop our assignment and drop our reservation. So I showed you, before what they looked like before and after our slot estimator. And then inside here, we're going to drop these assignments. And then once we click on this link, we should see that that assignment has been deleted. As you can see, we no longer have those reservations. So we're going to jump back to the slide deck, and we'll jump into storage pricing. Within BigQuery storage pricing, we have logical pricing and physical. Logical is the default pricing. This is for uncompressed storage size. So if you have a 1 gig data set that you upload, we will charge you for 1 gig of storage if it's uncompressed. Now, if we can compress that, we have physical, which is compressed billing. So if that compressed to 0.5 gig, you would get charged for 0.5 gig of storage, but there's a couple other features you have to pay for. So logical and physical, they have the same performance characteristic, and under the covers, it's stored the same. It's stored in our capacitor format, so there's really no difference in terms of any type of performance. It's more of a billing thing and not a performance thing. So time travel, with BigQuery, you get 7 days of time travel by default with logical storage. Time travel lets you go back in time and recover deleted data or deleted tables, and time travel is included with logical storage. For physical storage, you have an option to specify the amount of time travel, 2 to 7 days. So if you wanted to only go back, or you don't really use time travel, you would set it to 2 days. Or if you're using time travel, you use 7 days. If you need more travel than that, then we have snapshots and other techniques that you can take a look at. Now, failsafe is a period that holds 7 days of data in case you need to recover it, and this applies to the physical model. So for instance, if you had 2 days of time travel, we still have a 7-day window, so we could undelete data if you needed that. And this only applies to physical storage. So for logical, you get everything built in. It's one price for that. And physical, you would have to consider your time travel window and your failsafe window. So those are the options around those two versus logical versus physical. Logical is sometimes cheaper than physical, depends on your usage pattern. For instance, if you had that 1 gig and you deleted it every night and recreated it, you would pay for 1 gig of storage. But with physical, even though it's compressed to 0.5 gig, you'd pay for a 0.5 gig. But then since you delete it all and then recreated it the next night, you now have a 0.5 gig that you're paying for in time travel. And then you also have failsafe. And then the next night, if you delete it and recreate it, you got another 0.5 gig. And in that case, logical would be cheaper. So you do need to take a look at your patterns, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. Active storage. So this hasn't changed. So active storage is 90 days for that partition if it has been modified. So active, if it has been modified, is data that's been recently touched within the past 90 days. And then long term is it has not been modified. And this is 50% off the price. So those two still apply whether it's logical or physical. Before we jump into considerations, let's head over to BigQuery and see how we can set our storage billing model. So if you click on your data set, here I'll click on taxi data set, click on edit details, advanced options, and then here I can enable physical storage billing model, and I can change it from 2 to 7 days. So this does take some time to take effect, so please check our docs on how long that is. And then if you wanted to switch it back to logical, again, there's a delay before you can switch it back to the other billing model. But it's easy to do. You can also do this through the CLI commands using the BQ commands, and that will go ahead and update that. The first consideration is to think about, should you be on logical or physical storage? So we talked about that in the last slide. Definitely consider your time travel and your overall size of data. If you have petabytes of data, the cost savings for physical can be substantial. So definitely take a look at that. And then you can go ahead and flip that flag and switch to physical. When should you think about switching from on-demand to capacity-based pricing? So typically on demand, once you're scanning tons of data, terabytes, and costs get expensive, you're looking to switch to capacity-based pricing. Now, with auto-scaling, you can have a baseline of 0. So depending upon your workload characteristics, you can switch to a capacity-based model where you have a low baseline or a 0 baseline, and you have spiky workloads. Or you might want to look at, you just have a consistent workload that you want to have a reservation for, so you're paying a more of a known cost than doing your on-demand where the cost is charged based upon the data scanned. Also your SLA, if you have a reservation, you know you can have a baseline with a certain number of slots, and if your workload has to get done in a certain amount of time, you would have enough slots to cover that workload, so it would be get done in your SLA window. You can have on-demand capacity reservations, logical and physical billing models all at once. So you don't have to make this decision for every single project inside your organization. You can have on-demand and capacity at the different project levels. You can also have logical and physical billing set differently within a project, since this is at the data set level. So there's nothing to prevent you from mixing and matching to make sure you optimize your setup. When should I buy a commit? Typically, if you're using slots 24/7 and you're running them all year long, you want to take a look at a commit because there's 20% or 40% cost savings. Sometimes there's cost savings even if you're not using them 24/7. If you need 500 slots for 19 hours of the day, it might be something to take a look at to say, hey, I should purchase these slots, and then I have them at the reduced cost, and I don't have to worry about getting them during an auto scale rule. I know they're there, and I can get that additional savings and share them across different projects. So something to consider around commits. And then 1 year versus 3 year baselines. If you look at the slot recommender, this is the best way to tell if you should be switching between the different models. You might see different baselines for a 1 year versus a 3 year commit. The reason is your 3 year commit is getting the slots cheaper, and it might be cheaper to waste a few slots than to pay for them at auto scale pay-as-you-go prices. So you might see a different baseline between your 1 and 3 year commitment in the slot recommender. That's all. So hopefully this was helpful, and thank you for watching.